You already know the question. That's why you keep deleting it. It's late, your room is dark, your phone is a little too close to your face, and in the message box you type, "Can I ask what this is?" 6 words. That's all. No big speech, no dramatic confession, just one simple question that somehow feels like it could change everything. You stare at it for a second, then you delete it. Not because you don't know what to say. You know exactly what to say. That's the problem. So instead, you type something safer. Haha, yeah, smiley. And that's the one you send. Nobody taught you how to do this. There's no official guide to almost asking for clarity, but somehow you know the routine. Write the real thing, delete the real thing, send the safe thing, and then act like nothing happened. But something did happen. Not out loud, not in the conversation, maybe not even in a way the other person could notice, but inside you, something tightened. Because the question didn't disappear just because you deleted it. It stayed. It just moved somewhere quieter. That's the thing about what are we? It looks small.
3 words, 1 breath.
But emotionally, it doesn't feel small at all. Because in your head, it's never only, what are we? It becomes, do you actually want me? Was I imagining this? Did I make this bigger than it was? Am I too much for asking? Is this already ending and I'm just the last one to know? So when people say, just ask, they're not completely wrong. They're just underestimating what the question carries.
Because you're not only asking for a label, you're asking whether the version of this you've been quietly living inside is real. And that is why your finger freezes before it hits send. Because a clear answer can give you peace, but it can also take away the story you were still hoping for. And that's the uncomfortable part. Not knowing hurts. Of course it does. It makes you check your phone when you said you wouldn't. It makes you reread a message that has not changed. It makes one vague sentence feel like evidence, then nothing, then evidence again. But not knowing also gives you something. It keeps the door open. As long as there is no answer, there is no ending. Maybe they're just busy. Maybe they're not pulling away. Maybe this is still turning into something, just quietly. Not knowing lets your mind keep writing a version where things still work out. And sometimes that version is hard to give up. That's why the question feels dangerous. The danger isn't only the awkward conversation. It isn't even only rejection. It's what the question does to hope. It turns it into information. And information doesn't bend just because you need it to. So you don't ask. But here's where it gets more complicated, because sometimes you are not starting from nothing. You have noticed the places where your body stops relaxing, the pause after a warm message, the plan that sounds like a plan but never quite lands on the calendar, the feeling that something is close enough to hope for, but not clear enough to trust. And maybe that is what makes this so hard. Maybe you are not avoiding the question because you have no idea what the answer is. Maybe you are avoiding it because part of you already knows enough to be afraid. There is no obvious proof, no clear moment you can point to and say, this is it. Just a pattern small enough to explain away and steady enough to keep bothering you. That is a very specific kind of pain, because now you are not only waiting for clarity, you are waiting for clarity to be less painful than you suspect it might be. So instead of asking, you interpret.
The question changes shape. It becomes the pause before you reply. It becomes the screenshot you sent to a friend with no context except thoughts. It becomes the way you notice how long they took to answer, even though you pretend you didn't. It becomes the little story you tell yourself so the silence feels less sharp. Maybe this is just how they text. They wouldn't keep talking to me if they didn't care at all. And maybe some of that is true. Maybe some of it isn't. That's what makes it so exhausting. You don't have enough information to know, but you have just enough to keep hoping and just enough to keep hurting. So you keep waiting for something to become obvious. You keep hoping the relationship will define itself so you never have to be the one who asks it to. And for a while, not asking feels like control. It feels like you are protecting the connection, protecting the mood, protecting the version of you that seems easygoing. But slowly, the question spreads. It starts living in your morning, in the way you check your phone before you're fully awake, in the way your mood changes after one short reply, in the way you say no worries when there were actually several worries. And maybe that is the part nobody talks about. The silence is not empty. It is full of all the things you are trying not to say. Because maybe the answer is not the only thing that scares you. Maybe what scares you is becoming the person who has to ask, the person who cared first, the person who wanted more, the person who could no longer pretend that this was casual. Because asking can feel like a confession, not just what are we, but I care. I've been thinking about this. This matters to me more than I wanted it to. And in modern dating, that can feel strangely embarrassing. Like wanting clarity means you lost some invisible game. Like the person who needs less somehow has more power. Like being chill is safer than being honest.
So you shrink the question. You make it lighter. You make yourself easier to ignore. You try to want less, or at least look like you do. But wanting to know where you stand is not a character flaw. It does not mean you are dramatic. It does not mean you are asking for too much. Sometimes it only means your mind has run out of room to keep guessing on its own.
And wanting clarity is not the same thing as putting pressure on someone.
It is not a trick to make someone choose you. It is not a guarantee that the answer will be kind or clean or what you wanted. You already know what it's like to let one text rearrange your whole afternoon. A single "sounds good" turns into 40 minutes of decoding. And by the time you decide what it means, you've missed half the day just being somewhere else in your head. Clarity does something smaller than forcing an answer, but maybe more useful. It tells you where you are standing. It tells you whether you are waiting in a relationship or waiting inside a maybe. It gives your mind one less thing to solve alone at 1 a.m. And sometimes clarity does not give you the relationship. Sometimes it gives you yourself back. And yes, the answer might hurt. That part is real. A clear answer can close a door you were not ready to close. But not knowing hurts too. It's just quieter about it. It does not arrive all at once. It arrives as rereading, as checking, as giving someone your mood for the day when they may not even realize they are holding it. The answer costs something up front. Not knowing costs you a little bit every day. So if you're the person who writes the question and deletes it, I don't think you need another lecture about being brave. Here's what I actually want you to hear. Fear in this case made sense. You weren't avoiding a conversation. You were protecting a story, the one where things still worked out. Because not knowing still felt like hope. And hope is hard to put down when it is the only version where you're not losing them yet. But maybe the text you keep deleting was never only about them. Maybe it was the part of you that was tired of guessing, trying to get your attention. Because the question you didn't ask them didn't disappear. You kept asking it, to your friends, to their reply time, to the silence between messages, to yourself in bed when you were supposed to be sleeping. And maybe the real question was never, how do I get them to choose me? Maybe it was, how long am I willing to stay unclear just to keep the hope alive a little longer?